Well, I am Katie Beck, and this is Untold. We are back for a second episode. And today's guest is a voice you may be familiar with because he was a conservative radio host for years in Richmond, a very popular conservative radio host by the name of John Reid. And John Reid is making big headlines because he is running for lieutenant governor. He has stepped down from that radio program. He's taking a leap of faith and a leap into the political arena. So this is a really interesting life change for you, John. And obviously, it's a gamble. It's going to be interesting. You've got to face a primary in June. But before we get into those details, I just want to say this because it's a perfect platform and time to do it. Your show, John, your general rule was to honor all guests, no matter what their political opinion, no matter what party they were aligned with. And I think that served you well because Democrats and Republicans would come on your show and they would feel respected and heard and understood and maybe challenged, but not attacked. And I think that tactic is a good one. And I just want to say for the purposes of this show, on Untold, we are going to hear from various perspectives from people on both sides of the aisle. Last week, you heard from Mayor Danny Avula, who had his perspectives on good government as a Democrat. And this week, we're going to hear from John Reid, whose perspectives are going to lean way more to the right and to the conservative side of things. And I am going to give both their due time. I think this is about, as I've said from the beginning, a journey, an exploration, an understanding, an enlightenment. And this podcast is about the untold story of people. It's about people. It's about interesting people and their interesting journeys. So that being said, we're going to start out the podcast now.
Well, and good luck.
Yes, I'm taking a play from your playbook, John, and letting everybody be heard. So thank you for being with us. I know you're busy. I know you're on the road.
Oh, I'm excited to be here.
And I want to first just get a glimpse, the untold story of what your now day-to-day looks like. Because you were a morning host, which means you were getting up like at 1:30 in the morning.
Wasn't that bad. TV people are still getting up at 1.
What time were you getting up?
So my show started, when I originally went at WRVA, the show started at 5:30, and I talked them out of the 5:30 half hour. Because, listen, it just that was too much for me. That's one reason I'd left the TV morning show was It started at 5, and it was too much. So the show started at 6. The alarm went off at 4. I was usually at the station sometime around 5, an hour before the show started. I honestly would lay in bed looking at all the messages, people, good and bad, that people had sent me overnight. Here's something you should be covering. Here's what was on Fox News. Here's what's on CNN and MSNBC. And here's what's on Channel 6. And, trying to decide what people would be waking up talking about. And then the show would run like a marathon every day from 6 to 10. And then there'd be just this crash at the end of 4 hours of broadcasting.
I know what that feels like.
It was a wonderful, 8 years of doing it. It was great. And I got to talk to a lot of really interesting people. And there is something nice about being at the big legacy radio station that everybody knows.
Yeah.
But I thought I would be able to sleep in.
No.
And now my body still is conditioned to wake up at 4. So I didn't need the alarm clock, even though I was paranoid about it. And lately, I've been going to diners in the morning and talking to voters. And we have this incredible burden to get 10,000 valid voter signatures just to be able to compete on the ballot, which I naively thought would be 10,000's a lot, but I thought it would be easy. It's not easy.
Yeah.
Especially for me, if you wind up talking for a minute or 2 or 3 with every person who's going to sign.
Right.
You could be sitting there for a long time.
Right.
I like it, but it's a real challenge.
Yeah. So now your days are obviously not spent in that hot seat for those 4 hours, and instead traveling across the state of Virginia and sort of trying to just get support and get signatures and get money. How's that going?
It's a challenge. In Central Virginia, I think there are a lot of people who know me from the radio show. And unlike a lot of newscasts, talk radio is unscripted. So a topic comes up, or an audience member calls in or texts, or a guest brings up something. You don't have a script to go to. I mean, what you're hearing is the reaction of the host.
Right.
I think most talk radio, you couldn't script 4 hours. You wouldn't have a staff big enough to do that.
Right.
So people feel like, and I think they do, if you listen to the show for 6 months, you know me. So if you hated me from the radio show, you're probably not going to like me in person. If you love me from the radio show, there's, maybe I cuss a little bit behind the scenes that I wouldn't say on the radio, but the rest of it is just who I am. And that's good. When I get above Fredericksburg or I go out past Charlottesville, there are people who may have heard of me, but they didn't get the chance to listen to the radio program. So I'm getting an opportunity, and it's an important one if you want to run statewide. And it's a pretty big endeavor to introduce myself to them, to tell them my backstory, to talk about the issues that Richmonders probably already know where I stand, but other people are like, who are you? Tell me how you feel on the top 10 issues that are facing the state.
And I imagine it's sort of like, you're pioneering this path that you're on a deadline to get to this June primary, which is going to be, like you said, it's a daunting task.
Voting starts Friday, May 2nd.
Okay.
We have this, I think, really awful 45 days of early voting. Not because I'm trying to keep anybody from voting, but it is think of what happens in 45 days in your life.
Right. A lot can change.
I think we should all go to the polls within a compressed period of time with the knowledge we have about the candidates and the options that are presented to us and make a reasonable judgment, not over a month and a half. And so the fact that it starts on May 2nd, I got to be ready to activate the core Republican voters in my primary, people who know me and like me already, and then for a 45-day sprint, try to convince the other people who are on the fence or who aren't paying attention. It's a primary where we most likely won't have a lot of other action to pull people out. And I don't know, are we talking about 500,000 voters or will 100,000 voters make the decision as to who will be the Republican nominee?
Was it scary to make this decision? For all intensive purposes, you're unemployed right now, right?
Yes,
and that's
I'm reminded when I check the bank account.
I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm sure you know.
Yes.
But it just seems to me to make this leap, as someone who's gotten a steady paycheck every 2 weeks and has had a very popular show. The people that listened to your show were people who were like-minded and loved what you had to say, most of them, and really supported you. When you become a political candidate, if you can get 50% of people,
it's tough.
That's a high approval rating. You know what I mean? You're faced with a lot more criticism and a lot more struggles, I think.
I am really anxious about this. For years, I thought, I will never run. My father was in politics. He represented Henrico and Chesterfield for 18 years in the General Assembly and the House of Delegates. I saw the strain that put on him, the relationship strain that it put on my mother and him. My sister and I, that put a strain on us too when your dad is constantly out there. So for the longest time, I thought I just won't do it. And then when I got the radio show, I'm like, I got what I want. I got an opportunity to influence people, to talk to people, to share ideas. This is what I would want to do. I will tell you, 2020 changed it for me. What I considered to be not just problems. In fairness to the people who've been in elected office, bad things happen, and it's not necessarily going to unfold perfectly. People are going to be upset. Someone might get hurt. There will be loss. Bad things happen. I understand. Now that I'm in my 50s, I've got a little bit of time to look back and see that you can't expect perfection from elected officials or from others. I just felt like there was a real lack of judgment, good judgment, being made by people who were in authority. And I hate to say it, that was Ralph Northam, who used to come on my show every month. And I kind of liked him. I didn't vote for him, but that's okay.
Got to give him credit for showing up, though.
Up until the blackface thing happened, he showed up regularly. And I enjoyed talking to him. I tried to be, echoing what you said at the beginning, I tried to be super fair to him, knowing that it was probably an uncomfortable audience for him to speak to. During the commercials, I'd say, here are the topics I'm going to bring up. I'm not trying to ambush you here. We're not doing Meet the Press. Right. It's a conversation. And then he stopped coming. Mayor Stoney, who I kind of liked at the beginning. He's a Democrat. And I knew I wasn't going to get a Republican mayor of Richmond. I mean, maturity, you're just not going to get that. So I thought young, dynamic, black guy with connections to McAuliffe and all the money, maybe he can really rev up the good things that are happening in my hometown. So, we're not going to agree on everything. And I will take a shot on the things we disagree, but maybe there's a way that in the end, Richmond will be in a better place. And my ultimate goal as a Richmonder is for the capital city to be the kind of place that my parents want to be in, that my niece and nephew, as they get older, want to stay here, that college kids want to come to, and their events, and it's fun, and it's prosperous for everybody. I just looked at 2020 and 2021. I was like, what are we doing? These are not reasonable, good decisions that are predicated on freedom. I really believe in freedom. And as a gay Republican, which is a tough place to be, can I tell you about
that? We're going to talk about
the last 30 years of my life have not been easy. I'm really intent on people being able to live their lives as they see fit and have the government have, really limited influence over that. It doesn't mean somebody's not going to hurt your feelings, but I don't want the government meddling in everything that everybody does. And it was one of the appealing things that I thought Democrats were really committed to with the ACLU, or at least the old mindset of the ACLU was not having government micromanaging you and telling you what to do. And then in 2020 and 2021, I'm like, wow, everybody has gone mad. It seems to me there's some reasonable judgments that could have been made here that would protect, my mother's got a lung disease. She's on oxygen 24 hours a day. You want to talk about being paranoid about COVID. I was in her driveway with wipes, making sure that every grocery we brought in. Was that crazy? Maybe it was crazy, but I needed to protect my mother. So I talked about this on the radio. I understood the fear, the very real fear for some people in the community that they needed to be protected during COVID. But I didn't understand telling people whose lives were being destroyed when their businesses were closed, you must stay closed. No matter what you do, we're closing you down. We're limiting the number of people. We're going to go after you and make you a pariah in your own community. That, I thought, was bad judgment. And as it went on, between the way we dealt with the riots here, and it wasn't just protest. You can protest. I may not even like what you're protesting, but it's okay. But when it turns into a riot, I thought that was badly handled. I thought COVID was badly handled. And then I started, I hate to use the word radicalized because that has such a negative, but I thought, God, I got to get involved in this and not just be a commentator on the sidelines. I've spent an entire life trying to get ready to be in a place where if there was a call to leadership, I would be an appropriate, reasonable person. And then as this cycle came up, I thought, I got to do this. I'm 54 years old. There's not going to be a better, more important time to be engaged in this process and to discuss the issues that are before us. I've been watching pretty closely. It's not like I've just been off partying and then decided to come in and put my name on a poster.
You've been plugged in.
Yeah.
You're talking about these issues every day. And we're going to get back to some of your thoughts on those topics because I think they're,
But yes, I'm scared to be doing it, to be honest with you. It is nerve-wracking.
Right. And I want to go back to the gay Republican part, too, because let's get that elephant out in the room.
Yeah.
You are an openly gay Republican and could be, if you win your June primary, a historic candidate in the sense that there has not been another openly gay candidate that would have major party backing in a statewide race in Virginia ever. Yeah. Either party, which when I learned that fact, I was sort of surprised that neither party has ever backed an openly gay candidate for statewide office. So you're in a rare position. You said it's not easy to be a gay conservative. You said that. What did you mean by that?
Well, you're attacked on every side, and it's certainly gotten better than it used to be. One thing I'll always appreciate about George Allen when he was in the Senate, I had remarkable Republican bona fides from my father's time. I mean, I volunteered on every campaign, didn't get paid, volunteered on every campaign. I mean, I was the first driver for Jim Gilmore when he was going around the state, and I had my learner's permit. And
I love that story.
I joke, like, thank God the guy is not scared of seeing me, because a 15-and-a-half-year-old driving you around. But, there was a time not so long ago where this issue would have been a complete disqualifier within the Republican Party. I do think there has been a change certainly not in a biblical understanding of the nature of these relationships. And I'm not trying to argue with people. I'm not trying to change their mind. I'm trying to say that I'm going to protect you. Even if you don't agree with me, even if there's something about this that makes you uncomfortable, you can count on me to protect you. I think there.
Do you feel protected though by the party?
For the most part. Well, I didn't finish my story about George Allen. When I went to go work for him, there were people who were prodded on by Democrat activists in Washington, because you remember it was George W. Bush,
right,
seeking re-election in 2004, and the marriage amendment was a huge issue, and Democrat activists were actively looking for anyone who they thought was a traitor. Or it's always, if you're a hypocrite, then that's a legitimate thing to point out. I tell you, if you're lying or you're a hypocrite or you're breaking the law, then it's game on, right?
You're an easy target. Yep.
But I wasn't a hypocrite. Everybody knew my situation. Heck, I had talked about it when I was on TV. So it wasn't like it was a secret. But they went after me in a very high-profile way, along with everybody else, like Ken Melman, who worked for George W. Bush, and then activists from both sides of the political spectrum tried to get me fired. And you know what George Allen said to me? He called me in his office. It had really gotten bad. I don't remember where the Washington Post did a story, but it was a hot topic in Washington. Not just me, but other people too. And I'll never forget, because I thought, oh my God, is the guy going to fire me? I hope not. I really like him. I think I'm doing a good job for him. He said, you know what? I knew the deal. You have done nothing but be supportive and loyal and smart and hardworking. You're staying. Just focus on your work and do a good job for me. That's all I'm asking. And that was the last time we talked about it. It could have gone the other way. Had he been a wimp, or he'd been weak, or had he been manipulated by people who felt strongly. I mean, I'm not going to get into an argument about whether they feel strongly about the issue, but he said, I am hiring people based on their commitment to conservative principles and their ability to do good work for me. And he kept me on the staff. I respected that, and I tried to.
That must have been a sort of a pivotal moment in your career, because I can imagine the pressure of that was enormous. I mean, it's not something that you can, when you make a mistake or you say something or you do something wrong, that you can own it and apologize for it, but
just being who you are.
Right. How do you,
it's tough.
Yeah. How do you change that? But let me ask you this, the intersection of these two, right? Like conservatism being openly gay. Do you feel like you are equal parts attached to both of those communities? Do you feel like you have an attachment to the LGBTQ community, and do they attach to you, or is it a disqualifier that you're conservative and they're like, John?
I've been so disappointed because I stood up for gay marriage when it was uncomfortable to do that. And my whole pitch was, I believe in the family. I mean, I think the building blocks of a stable society are the family. Therefore, it would probably be wise if you conclude that this is not a mental illness, as so many people, and it's not a deviant behavior that's, I don't know, pick your deviant. If it's not in that group, you can create an environment in which you can emulate the normalcy of the family building block, which is so fundamental to a stable society, and that in the end will be a positive thing for America.
I do think there has been at least some shift in your mind about the acceptance, because I remember you telling me a story about you were previously in television. You worked at Channel 8, WRIC, and you were first an investigative reporter / anchor, and then you were an morning anchor there. And I remember you telling me this story about, and this was what, like 2000? When was it? Like
It would have been. I started in '94,
94.
so it was late
okay.
'90s.
Late '90s.
Yeah,
late '90s. You worked there, and you fill in the blanks. But I remember you telling me when you worked there that you were very afraid about being outed to the station, and that you thought your job could be on the line. And there was this weekly publication that came out called Style Weekly, and they would deliver the copies to the lobby, and you would rush out there and scan the Style Weekly to make sure that no one had outed you. And I just remember thinking to myself, like, what is it like to be in that position every day of wondering about whether your identity is going to cost you?
It was a weird time because I think people knew my story, but when they say, "Hey, just keep it to yourself," I get it. Nobody wants to have someone's sexuality thrown in their, in your face all the time. If you really don't care, you really don't care. I don't need to hear that. But if I remember I went to Puerto Rico once, and one of my coworkers was like, "Oh, that's the gayest outfit. That's the I've got a little silver bracelet or something." Like, "Oh, that confirms everything about you." I was like, "Oh my God, what is that supposed to mean?" And it became more and more uncomfortable, where I was worried that it would become an issue. Now I don't think it would be an issue if you do your job and you're a normal person and you treat everybody with the basic professionalism, if not niceness, that you would expect. I don't think it's an issue. So that's a real improvement.
Well, I mean, you've gone from being fearful of this being in one publication
to talking about it
on the top
right.
level. I mean, you're running for the second highest office in the state, and you're putting it all out there, and you're in a committed relationship. You've been in for 8 years, and you guys are engaged. And I mean, it's
well, don't say.
Am I not supposed
we're
to say
about
that?
to be we're about to be engaged,
oh,
but I don't want to.
Did I just do that?
It's okay. It's okay.
I was using the word engaged, not
Alonzo's
as an
going to
engagement.
come knocking down the door like, "Where's my ring?" in a second.
Sorry, Alonzo. Jeez.
But it is a big difference, and I think it's good that we've reached a place where normal people can live a normal life without fearing for their job. I don't know what your contracts say, but mine used to have if you bring the station into ill repute or disdain, you can be fired without any notice. And I kept thinking, is that me? I mean, is my
sexuality
existence, is that going to be the thing that ruins my career, even if I do everything else right?
Do you think that this is a primary, so this is going to be people voting in June that are, to the rightest part of your party. And those people are usually the ones who vote in primaries, to be honest. What feeling are you getting out there among voters when you go out? Is it something people bring up to you? Is it an issue? And in those kind of rural pockets of Southwest Virginia or are people maybe not comfortable with this still?
Well, I don't think everybody's comfortable with the issue. I choose to bring it up proactively because I know that people talk. Whether you talk about it or not, they're going to talk about it. It is a part of who I am. It's not a fake rumor. It is true that this is who I am. So I would always rather be completely candid with Republicans and with the voting population in general, and then they get to make the decision. It also gives me an opportunity to say, if this causes you, my normal interaction is, I hope you don't care about this. But if you do, then you should feel confident that I'm going to defend you, even if you disagree with me. If you have a minister who would say to Alonzo and me, "You may not be married in this church," honestly, would that hurt my feelings? Yes, it would hurt my feelings. But I'm an adult. You get to be the minister at your church, and you get to have your beliefs, and your church gets to decide, not me, what you're comfortable with and your biblical interpretation of the world. And if we want to have that conversation, I'll have it with you, but that's not the role of the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia. That's not the role of a government official. I should be looking out for your freedom. And I don't think everybody can say that, right or left. I think there are a lot of people who really do show up saying, "You know what? I don't want this church to make a decision I disagree with. I don't want the minister to do something that I disagree with. And I will try to force them." Now, not John Reid. I am going to make sure that I stand up for you because I know what it feels like to be put in a situation where people don't accept you, that you're in a minority position or you're being scrutinized. if we want freedom for everybody, we have to have freedom for everybody. And that's my commitment in this role or as a talk show host or, whatever the future holds, is to advocate for that.
Yeah. And I think, we're going to talk more about all of this, but for this,
I'm glad you started with it because it is what everybody asked me.
It is.
So it's okay.
I mean, because it's unusual, and it is unusual. It's as we said, it's a historic situation, and I think you were quoted in one article as saying, people are either surprised to learn I'm gay when they know I'm a conservative, or they're surprised to learn I'm conservative when they know I'm gay. Like there's always this sort of shock factor of one or the other.
It's a weird way to live your life, but I've been doing it for 30 years, and you know what? I could roll on with my life. The audience at WRVA was really good to me, and they accepted me. Whether they felt comfortable about some things or not, they accepted me. So I think I probably could have stayed, and I could be 80 years old and look back and go, why didn't I have so many complaints and so many thoughts about the right way to do things. Why did I allow this to prevent me from being engaged in the public policy discussion? And who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 or 7 months? I mean, I don't think it's going to be a disaster, but there's no guarantee this is going to work. But I'll tell you, I feel like I will be doing the right thing for myself by engaging in the conversation, hopefully being reasonable and responsible. I hope that people who have never met a gay man will say, all right, this is different than I expected. I hope maybe some of the Democrats who reflexively hate me because I'm a Republican will go, gosh, this guy actually seems, we don't agree on everything, but he seems semi-reasonable and he seems nice, and he's not the devil incarnate. I think there's an important message here, and when it comes down to it, especially when I look at the spectrum of people who are also seeking this office, I don't think it's a big leap for them to say, wow, the professional experience that he brings in business, the communications, I hope people would say the thoughtfulness with the people that I've engaged in, that this will be a reasonable choice, that I will be a reasonable choice for this job. I hope.
Well, good stopping point to take a break. We're going to be right back. Well, I think when anyone talks about your political influences, they always like to draw from the Ronald Reagan exposure and how unique it is to have the kind of, sort of intimate proximity to someone that you did with a former president. I mean, it's an incredible story. So I'll just set you up with that. I know you were his intern, and I know you spent a lot of time with him and Nancy, and sort of just paint the picture of what your life with Ronald Reagan was like.
It was like a weird, wonderful dream. 1993. I had been working as an intern the summer of 92. I was at the end of my college career at Baylor University in Waco, Texas, and I got an internship with Tom Bliley, the congressman, who had been mayor of Richmond, if you remember. Congressman Bliley was in the House of Representatives, and I was working in his office, and I went to a party in Georgetown. And I don't know how I got invited, but it was on the rooftop. It was a fantastic party. And I'm talking to this guy from California, and he says, "Oh, I work for Ronald Reagan." I was like, "What? You work for Ronald Reagan? He's my political idol. It's amazing. What is he doing?" Because this was almost 4 years out of the White House. And of course, we thought George H.W. Bush would get another second term. Remember, it was Bill Clinton, and no one thought the governor of Arkansas was really going to be George H.W. Bush after the Gulf War. They had the parade down. It's just weird when you start thinking about how things change really quickly. And so the guy was talking a bit about Ronald Reagan, and there was no email. So I typed up my resume, and I put it in a FedEx package, and I sent it to L.A. the next week. I went out to Los Angeles before probably like October, November. First time to California, never been there. And didn't meet with the president. I was so disappointed because I really wanted to meet him, but I got to meet with the staff. They hired me for a 3-month internship. And you know what it was go get the coffee, go make the I was the guy who
took the dog to the vet and got the mail. And
that actually took trust. At first, they just had me cutting the clips out of 10 newspapers every morning.
I remember you telling me that.
And you had to cut the clips out and put them on the paper and make copies for the president and Mrs. Reagan and the chief of staff and the communications director. Now you think we just forward the emails to everybody. But it was, if that puts it in perspective how long ago this was.
Labor.
It was Super Bowl weekend, and there was this big discussion of who would write the first draft for the president's birthday speech with Margaret Thatcher. And I wasn't supposed to be hearing this conversation, but I heard the conversation. I was like, you know what? And my parents were floating me a little bit of money, but I was paying my way by being the resident advisor to my fraternity chapter at UCLA, which was quite a contrast to Baylor.
I don't know that I knew that story.
Yeah,
okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, from Baylor, where you don't drink and you don't dance, to UCLA, where that's the least of your worries.
Right.
It was quite a social con. So anyway, I'm in the fraternity house on Super Bowl weekend, and I lock myself in while everybody else is partying, and I'm working on this speech. Ideally, Ronald Reagan speaking to Margaret Thatcher and 1,000 donors to the Reagan Library. And then I went in and I gave it to my boss, and I said, I know this may be a little too forward, but I've worked on this. I think
so they didn't ask you to do it?
Oh, no, they didn't ask me to do it. They were shocked. And she's like, yeah, okay, coffee, please. And
Thanks.
but later that afternoon, she came to me and she said, so you wrote this is yours. And I said, yeah, I spent a lot of time, and I think I caught his voice, and I was making things up to try to make it good. But I know, I've known Margaret Thatcher from my upbringing, so I thought it was pretty good. And she's like, well, we like it. We're going to send it home with him tonight and have him look at it. And if he's okay, and Mrs. Reagan will have to look at it, but if it works, he will, of course, change it to what he wants to say. But this is a good starting point. And I was so excited. I called my parents. I said, oh, my gosh, I can't believe this. I might be not an official speech writer to Ronald Reagan, but wow, wouldn't that be awesome? And that's how it worked. And then they kept me for the whole year. And I was able to, help do first drafts of things and sit with him and ask him questions and listen to how he wanted to position different public statements that he was going to make. I don't want to overstate. It wasn't like I was Secretary of State at all. I was still a 22-year-old who didn't know anything, but was just trying to, do good.
Wedge your foot in the door.
But it was an amazing experience, and they were so nice. I almost didn't take it because I thought, what if Ronald Reagan is
I was going to
awful?
ask you that. So sometimes you have an ideal of an idol or some picture in your mind of how great they are, and then you get the reality, and they're just not that picture.
And they had said he's dumb, he's mean, he's got dementia. I mean, this is one of the reasons I was so harsh on the past president was they were so mean to Ronald Reagan. And I started with him on January 20th, 1993, the day Bill Clinton took office. Seriously. I arrived in L.A. at 9 a.m. Bill Clinton was on the West Front taking the oath of office.
Wow.
And there's some funny stories about that sometime over a drink, I'll tell you. But I was worried, will he be less than I expected? He was great. He was nice to little kids. These little kids would come up and say, oh, will you sign my picture? And I realized it's the same little kids every day who are coming to get this. And I said to him once in the elevator, it's like, Mr. President, I don't know if you know, I think they're selling that picture. So you're trying to be nice to them because you think they're a fan. I think they're selling the pictures. And without missing a beat, he said, well, if that's what it takes to feed their family, I will do it. So, and I think that was sincere. I don't think they were trying to feed their family. I think it was a LA hustle for money. But that's where the guy's heart was. And so all the nastiness about him that I had heard from leftists, and some of it's just political, you beat up on the other guy. I left after a year with more admiration for him as a man, as a leader. I saw that the relationship with him and Mrs. Reagan was real. That whole love story, it was real. It was real. Because I was in their house every day.
Yeah.
And
you were like watching the evening news with them, weren't you?
With him. It was amazing.
You watched the news every night?
Not every night. There were plenty of times I'd go over in the evening and drop things off, and they would ask me to come in, and there'd be a leftover sandwich. It was weird. He had a lunch that was catered every day. I don't know if I should tell this story, but he had a lunch that was catered in the office every day that he was there. And he grew up in the Depression, like my grandfather did. And there were so many times where I thought, this is just like my grandfather. He would wheel his own little lunch over to my desk and say, could you finish this? I feel guilty. I can't finish it. And I was like, okay.
Yeah, it's not like you're going to say no.
Well, he had cut the chicken or he had cut the steak so that he wouldn't have eaten off of it.
Right.
And he had put it to the side, and he just didn't want to waste.
That
and
is
then one
fascinating.
Day,
I
we
mean,
had
that's
to, we had to
very
clean out his
interesting.
desk, and it was all plastic bowls that were stacked up. And I said to him, I said, oh my gosh, you have all these plastic bowls. He was like, well, they're very good plastic bowls. We can't waste things. And I'm thinking, the guy was president for 8 years, governor of California.
Right.
I guess he's a multimillionaire, not by today's standards, right? But the guy is stacking up the plastic bowls because of that
mentality
mindset
of don't waste
It
things.
was really a fascinating time.
Yes, that is what an interesting exposure. My goodness. Yeah, no wonder that always comes. And you like to drive through too, I understand. Like the McDonald's drive through, despite Nancy's.
His joke was, have you ever heard of a Democrat Happy Meal? I was like, no, Mr. President, I haven't. And he said, that's when you order everything on the menu and tell the lady at the window that the guy behind me is paying for it, which was
truly
funny
a Republican
then.
joke.
And
yes, I know that plays well at campaign functions for you. So I know he was a major inspiration. I know your dad was a major inspiration. Yeah. And I know, him just having the time that he did as delegate here. Everybody knows who Jack Reid was, especially locally. I mean, he's a name.
Back then they did.
A name that's
it's been interesting. It's been years since he passed away 2 years ago, and I was with him when he passed, and I would go do the radio show in the morning, go to the nursing home, and spend the next 12, 14 hours with him in the weeks leading up, to his passing. And it was horrible, but it was great at the same time because we had conversations even about the gay issue. Not to go back to that.
No, I want to go back to that. I know that you told me about some of those conversations and how, you really reached an understanding of each other that you'd never had before that time. And in those hours, I guess maybe because the time was fleeting and you both knew it, it was just the right time to reach that acceptance. But I know that has given you great peace personally. To have that.
He was always, one thing I'll say about my parents who are Bible believers, and not moving them off of that, and I'm proud of them for being that way, but I never had to worry about them abandoning me or rejecting me. There was tension, I'm not going to lie, and we had some real knockdown, drag-out family conversations, but both my mother and my father, I was their son, they were not going to
They were going to love you, yeah.
But those extended conversations, as he knew the end was coming, were really important. And towards the end, he was shocked at what had happened in 2020. He was shocked that a governor of Virginia would allow the things to happen that were happening, that were, not just differences of opinion, but a breach of order and people being hurt. I think that was what was shocking to him, was that he expected a governor to even say to his own people, listen, you got to obey the law. I'm with you on some of the things that you're upset about, perhaps, but we're not going to harm other people. And everybody goes to bed at night in the fan or in Jackson Ward with a gun under their pillow because they're afraid somebody's going to come in the door. And that's not Richmond. That's not Virginia. We shouldn't allow that. So we had conversations like that. And it was weird. He said, how come you don't run? And I thought, are you serious?
Wow.
But we had that conversation.
That's interesting. What was your answer?
I don't know that I brought up our previous half hour, but he knew it. I just said, well, Dad, I've always done the media thing. And he said, well, if you want to run, you should do it. I guess he had watched me from my 20s into my 40s.
It was all interwoven, really.
Yeah.
I mean, you had the experience with Reagan, and then, you've had the TV thing, you've had the radio thing, but you've also had, the George Allen campaign. It's really an interwoven career of politics and media. If I look at it
It is.
But he had to really, I think he gave you his full acceptance in those last days, right?
It felt like it to me.
Yeah.
Look, if we were to have a Bible conversation, I'm not sure that we would ever see eye to eye on it. And that's on me. On the day that I die, I will face God and answer for everything I've done in life, just like anybody else. And, there's a place in life where those things become real to you. Maybe it's seeing your parents pass or decline, or maybe it's just realizing, oh my gosh, when I was 29, I didn't think this party would ever end, and now you know, some of my friends have passed away. You know your mortality is coming, and you need to make sure that you've done the right things in life, which is probably one of the motivating factors for me being in this race. Is I don't have kids. I think Alonzo and I would probably like to have a full family with children in the next few years. That's been put on hold for this campaign for the moment. But I do have a niece and a nephew, 5 and 4. My sister has moved back here from Maryland because I said you got to be in Virginia, not to vote for me, but because I think the schools are better, and I think the mindset in Virginia is better. So it is really weighing on me as I head through my 50s. What will it be like in 20 years here? Will we have a robust economy? Will we have a standard of living where you can walk down the street and be a minority and be safe?
Well, that's a good point to hit pause on this little chapter, and we will be right back. Okay, we're back with John Reid, and now we're going to sort of ask you for a quick to-do list. If you are to be nominated, and then if you are to win, and you are the lieutenant governor, what do you see as sort of the top issues that need to be addressed in the state of Virginia quickly, urgently?
I've called almost everybody who's had this job in the past, privately. I won't say who and what they've said, but it's been interesting the way the different people have approached the job. And I want to be someone who is out front on issues. I want to be someone who's driving the conversation. As lieutenant governor, you don't get to initiate legislation. You probably get to influence it because you're in the room and you're ruling on what can pass through the Senate and not. And of course, it's the breaking of the tie votes, and we are so tight, 21-19 in the state Senate, that's important. But I'm very excited about being on the front end of helping to craft legislation that will solve some of the issues that we face. And outside of the legislative session, being an ambassador for the state of Virginia. And one of the roles that I had when I was a partner in a big PR firm, I was the director of international relations. And I joke with people, I thought that meant they would give me an apartment in Paris. Instead, they sent me to Kuwait. A little different than what I was expecting. But I was doing a lot of that sales work, not just for the company, but for America, American interests. I know what it takes to go in front of different companies. I think Glenn Youngkin, as a former CEO, has done this. He on a different level, of course, than me as the CEO at Carlyle. But I think I can help bring businesses to Virginia and inform. I don't mean to be disrespectful to the senators in either party, Republican or Democrat, but inform them of what these companies are looking for when they're choosing where to spend $1 billion. They got to be sure that the right to work that exists in Virginia today continues, that they're not going to get swamped by labor unions that really aren't worried about the workers, but are worried about taking money from companies and costing them more and getting involved in politics. And the right to work that we have in Virginia is really important.
So upholding that would be a top priority of yours.
It's big. Yeah. If that's lost, I want to be honest, people who aren't paying attention, your kids won't have the same opportunities in another 2 years if we lose that. Because all the companies that Glenn Youngkin has been able to recruit, they're counting on that staying there. They will go to Tennessee. They will go to South Carolina. I mean, heck, any of these states that don't have an income tax, you think the CEOs are going to come to Virginia if they can't be confident that at least they can operate in a business-friendly state? And I think that's one of the key issues that we're going to be debating in the next 2 years.
It seems like it's going to be a hot topic for both. I think the Democrats have a very different perspective on that, and
they do.
Yeah,
and we should keep talking. But that can't slide behind the personality debates. That's premier. I want to make sure that this primary and the general election is based on, the votes are based on real issues that are going to impact people. Something else, crime I think is huge. Jason Miyares has done everything he can with the Commonwealth's attorneys who will work with him to try to suppress the explosion in crime that we've seen. But, in the West End, in Short Pump, where I live right now, the lady who runs one of the drugstores that I go to frequently says, I get robbed every day. I don't even bother calling the cops. They can't come. Henrico police are great, but they can't, they can't cover it. And then we've had a 74% increase in murders in Henrico. I mean, there's a problem, and I don't know at what point it will reach crisis level for the average person. But I go by the old Bird Middle School where I went to middle school, and I see, what is it, Be the Light or Let There Be Light, that's a tribute to that young girl who was murdered. And I think bad things happen, and they always have, but there's a frequency to it, and there's a maliciousness to it that we need to get a hold of. And I think I'm one of the leaders who can help set that standard in a fair way, in a reasonable way, knowing that not everybody lives the same way. But we have to have some basic standards about how we interact with people. And I guess that's my main pitch for me in the role of Lieutenant Governor, is that you're going to, if you have listened to my show or if you watch me closely during this election, I hope you will feel confident that I will listen to other people intently, not rolling around like, how am I going to beat you back, but listen to the point you're trying to make, and that in the end, I will make good judgments that are considered, that are thoughtful, that are reasonable, rather than just being a political hack.
Well, I was going to ask you, I mean, do you think you are going to be able to apply that same sort of version of diplomacy that you did on your show as a leader? Is it possible to do that? Because, I mean, you have all of these people you have to answer to, and obviously, the people who elected you. Could you really be that same person on the radio that respects the other side with kindness and listens and processes maybe an idea that you weren't comfortable with before openly,
It's hard. And, if you go to my Facebook page, you'll see that I'm not pulling punches. I'm calling people out.
You're on a side. Yeah. We've gathered that today.
And that's right. That's true. But, I've been picking up the phone and calling Democrats, not expecting them to come out and endorse me, but to say, hey, what's your take on this? What's the deal? What do you think? I won't reveal it. I've said I'm not going to embarrass you.
Research of position,
and to signal to them from the beginning. I want to get back to the time where we may not agree on everything, but there's a certain civility about this that we can reach a conclusion that will be in the best interest of the majority of Virginians. It's not a coincidence. I chose on my little tagline for the stickers and the brochures, the voice for all Virginians. And I had some people like, oh my gosh, don't do that. That sounds like you're too wishy-washy. I'm like, I don't think anybody who's listened to me thinks I'm wishy-washy, but I do think we need leaders who are going to rise above some of the nastiness of this, not let things slide and not be disingenuous about our positions, but open-minded. There's a gay group here in Richmond that is certainly left of where I am that I intend to reach out to. I don't know if they'll meet with me. We are not going to agree, but I want to make sure that they know that this is a historic opportunity for them too, and that I'm not going to try to hammer them and hurt them. I want to reach out to the most right-wing, Bible-believing, evangelical Christian to say, we're not going to agree on the gay thing. I know that. But can we talk through how we handle this
Can we find
in
a
this
middle,
society?
maybe?
Yeah. And you can still do you,
but
how can we find that commonality? That's what's missing, I
think.
think.
It's a difficult balance. I mean, like I said, that you struck that tone on the radio, and I think a lot of people really appreciated it. And it would be a unicorn in politics for frankly, for someone to really be able to embrace, multiple and opposing perspectives. But that being said, that last little point here I want to make, what happens if you are unsuccessful in June? I mean, I imagine you're going to have to get back to work at something, and I don't know if that means finding a new political role to seek, or will you go back to broadcasting?
If you see me as the greeter at Walmart on July 1st, this will have gone very badly. I don't think that's going to happen. I'm feeling good about things. I mean, there's a lot of organizational elements that have to be pulled together, but I'm willing to put in the work. I think I got more energy than anybody who is in this field, Republican or Democrat. I'm trying to prove to people that I'm willing to do that work. Even if I win, it's a part-time job. You know that, right?
Right.
Somebody joked with me, said, "Where's the lieutenant governor's mansion?" I was like, "I think it's my little house in Short Pump." I don't think.
Yeah, right.
You don't get a mansion and you don't get a big paycheck. So I hope that I will continue to have an opportunity to be in media in some capacity. I've got a couple of media consulting firms that have asked me to come in and talk to them and see if there's some overlap there.
Would you run
again? But I'm planning on winning.
I know you are.
Yeah.
Would you run again for something else?
I don't know. Let's see.
Doors open, never say never.
I think that this is the perfect role for me to play. It's open. I don't have to push anybody out or try to push anybody out. With Winsome Sears moving on to run for governor, the position is open. I do think we're in a unique place culturally where I think normal people in the Republican Party and the Democrat Party are looking for that reasonable, responsible person who isn't just a crass politician, who's kind of lived a life and in a lot of different ways, someone who brings a different perspective, which I do. I'm reminded every time I walk into a room, I'm a unique character in all of this. And I think maybe that's going to play in the right direction. And I hope that if I get... Thank you so much for giving me the chance to talk about this, because even if somebody heard, oh, there's the right-wing guy on the radio, if they watch this show, I'm hoping they'll say, well, I don't agree with him on everything, but he seems like a thoughtful guy. That's what I want.
Well, and ironically, at the beginning of this program, we were talking about how former mayor of Richmond, LeVar Stoney, came on your show, and you guys had some tense conversations, I think. Yeah. And he is also announced he is running for lieutenant governor on the Democratic side. Yeah. So eventually...
And I think it's likely that he will be the nominee. There's 7 candidates.
Yeah.
7 Democrats.
It's a wide field.
So just like how he won mayor, never getting to 50% plus one, I think it's likely that he'll be the nominee. I would like to be the guy who holds him accountable.
You guys have a history, that's for sure. You can write a new one, but he is certainly going to be somebody that we reach out to and invite on as well.
Oh, you should. Yep. And I'll be watching that one. I want to hear what he has to say.
I know you will. I know you will. Thank you so much for coming on today, Katie. John. I really appreciate having you. And I want to just take a moment here at the end of the podcast. This is not something that I plan to do with every podcast, but this is sort of a special occasion. I would like to dedicate this podcast to a person, my Aunt Laura, and I would like to dedicate it to her because she has been battling ALS for some time, and it's a very punishing, debilitating disease, and it's been really hard on her. And she is an avid consumer of journalism and has been a huge supporter and fan of my journalism for as long as I've been doing it. She listened to the last podcast, and she's had to since make some difficult decisions about her future and how that's going to play out. But she is really a fascinating person. If I could tell her untold story, I would. She was an acupuncturist. She could be a handyman. She can hang drywall and install cabinets. She's an artist, and she's hysterically funny, and she's a great aunt. So I just want to dedicate this podcast to her because I know she's going to be listening. It might be the last one she has the chance to hear. And I just want to tell you, Aunt Laura, that you are loved and you will be missed, and rest easy. For everyone else, I hope it's just a gentle reminder that time is precious and life is complicated and painful and beautiful and short. So love the people that are close to you and cherish your time. And I cherish your time, and I really cherish the fact that you came back for a second episode. I hope you will be with us here on Untold the next time. Thanks so much. Untold is a production of WTVR CBS 6, executive produced by Mike Bergazzi and Katie Beck, directed by Nick Maharaj and Brock Taylor, and edited by Curtis Akers. Follow the show on Instagram at Untold_WTVR.